So when I said in opening on Monday that this case is about choices and responsibility, this is what we're referring to, right? The responsibility phase is what we're here for now. Essentially, you're being asked, what was the defendant's mental state at the time of the offenses for which she's convicted, and whether she should be responsible for that. Let's address the obvious. What Ms. Schabusiness did to Shad is disturbing. It's conduct we don't see often. It's conduct that you may hear about and think, my gosh, that person must not have been in their right mind when that happened. I'm not going to sit here and try to convince you otherwise. But you've already carefully listened to the evidence and followed the law that the judge gave you. And you'll do so going forward as well. Because you will be told what a mental disease or defect is and what it is not. A mental disease is not antisocial conduct. It's not conduct brought about by use of a controlled substance, a temporary mental state caused by a controlled substance. A person is not mentally ill just because they commit something that's unnatural, that's so enormous, that just is beyond comprehension, right? You'll be instructed that those are not mental diseases or defects. So as disturbing as the conduct you already heard about is, and may be, that's not where the analysis ends. You'll hear from several experts. Defense already went over Dr. Litton and her qualifications, and how she supports Ms. Schabusiness's NGI plea. But you'll also hear some issues with Dr. Litton's methodology, her analysis, and ultimately her conclusions. The state will call several psychologists of its own, both of whom were actually court appointed, not by either party, by the court, when they did their analysis and meetings with Ms. Schabusiness. Dr. Matthew Seipel will talk about some of the issues that he had with Dr. Litton's methodology and her conclusions. He'll testify about those. You'll also hear from the court-appointed expert, Dr. Christina Engman. Again, came here on a court order, not retained by either side. And she'll tell you that she does not believe Ms. Schabusiness is suffering from a mental disease or defect, or that she was unable or lacked substantial capacity to conform her conduct to the requirements of law or appreciate the wrongfulness of her conduct. Okay? So you'll hear from a variety of witnesses, some of whom are experts, some of whom are lay witnesses or civilians. You'll hear about, and you've already heard about, confounding all of this is the defendant's drug use immediately before the offense. We've all heard about that, defendants admitting that and acknowledging that. You'll hear about how methamphetamine has those effects, has effects of psychosis, that has that result in people. And again, it's not a mental disease or defect if you're using controlled substances and it causes that result. So you'll hear from these experts and witnesses, but ultimately, in our state, whether somebody is suffering from a mental disease or defect is a jury determination. It's up to you, based on the facts and opinions that you hear. Certainly the opinions of the experts will be valuable for you, but you've already heard all the evidence. You know more about this case than any of these experts likely do. You heard testimony about Ms. Schabusiness's mental state both before and after, in close proximity to the offenses that she's convicted of. You've heard her friends, her roommate, officers who had contact with her, Mr. Hendricks, Ms. Pakinich, describe their interactions in close proximity to this offense and reported nothing out of the ordinary, some of whom are her friends who've known her for quite a while. Mr. Gannon, Mr. Tomes, you've already heard about their observations of the defendant. But more importantly, you saw the defendant's own words. Hours after all of these offenses occurred, really close proximity, you saw her be able to recall, be able to talk about it, and more importantly, you saw her mannerisms, how she was talking about it. Did not appear anyone was suffering under some manic episode. She's calmly talking about it with officers, providing information that is consistent with everything they're seeing. What does that indicate? She's aware of what's going on. She remembers everything. This isn't somebody who is not appreciating what happened. So that's why we call all these experts, but ultimately, at the end of the day, it's a jury determination. It's a factual issue for you. And the state believes that when you hear all that evidence and consider the evidence you heard in the first phase, that you'll find the defendant has failed to meet her burden, that she should be held responsible for the conduct that she's convicted of and what she did to Shad. Thank you.